So the U21 arrived in this cardboard box with the outer sleeve akin to the Manker E14. Comes with the instructions and specs manual, a wrist strap, and 2 spare O-rings. They forgot to include a USB cable, but normally it does come with a micro USB charging cable as well. Manker's U21 is purpose-built as a thrower, there's no question about it. It's just they decided to go with a 26650 or 18650 with the anti-rattle sleeve form factor overall, rather than, like say, ThruNite's TN31, which actually accommodates 3 cells. Now right off the bat, you see there's this fairly large bezel here that holds down a lens as well as the reflector within, and you can see that anti-reflective coating there. It's double-sided, and sitting perfectly centered within is the XHP35 HI emitter. And here's a close-up shot of that. Now one thing you may note right off the bat is it's a symmetrical design overall, with the engraving here, the switch, the carvings on either side of the switch, so it's just about perfectly symmetrical all around. Balanced with the fins here and there. I would say probably the only thing that kind of throws off the symmetry is the tail cap here, which this doesn't align perfectly 90 degrees with the side here, but again, I don't know, that would be for some serious OCDs. However, there are people with asymmetry phobia out there, so I don't know if you're one of those, but if you are, this may drive you nuts, but I don't know, man. I mean, you know, then again, you have people who have symmetrophobia, so but bottom line is that overall, it's a very, very nice, clean look to it. I personally, subjectively like it a lot. There are a few heatsink fins on either side of the light here that help with heat dissipation. This battery tube, it actually can be mounted either way. So one thing to know is that they do carve a battery polarity indicator, indicating that positive goes this way, but this tube can actually be reversed around. Unlike the E14, the threads are balanced on both ends, so it allows you to install it the original way with the polarity indicator correct, or reverse, in which case the battery polarity indicator would be wrong. So I would advise them to actually remove that. Although the threads are not square cut, they came well greased with the exception of the underside of the O-ring. Again, I like to just emphasize that because greasing serves 2 purposes. A, it fills up the microscopic pores underneath it, thereby helping the water resistance. B, it prevents it from binding. In case you somehow hit a snag on the upper surface, the bottom surface will bind and it will contort the O-ring, thus compromising water resistance. Now, the threads are fully anodized on either end, so like I said, depending on how you mount it, you could fully lock it out just by a quick twist. Thick, beefy springs on either end serves 2 purposes. One is to help it to achieve the current that this light is capable of, and B, it provides a good range for cells that it can accommodate. Case in point, currently my shortest and longest cells are actually in the 18650 category, so I got the anti-rattle sleeve in there, and with that installed, you can see that the AWIMR just peeks out from the end of the tube. And this ThorFire one sticks out a bit. It's at 69.6 millimeters. But again, no problems accommodating either size of the cells, as you can see. Now, one thing of note about the greasing, I would emphasize that you put a thicker grease at the throat so as to prevent this scenario from happening, which unfortunately I put a light grease there. So as you can see, I kind of twisted tight down here and it's twisting off the tube instead of the tail cap. Now with that anti-rattle sleeve installed, I would really have to shake this vigorously in order to generate any kind of sound. At the throat of the light is the electronic side switch with the Quinlan logo emblazoned on it. And again, keeping that perfect symmetry there, as you can see. And on the reverse side of that is the micro USB charging cable with a rubber cover protecting it. This light is water resistance down to IPX7, which means it could take some serious splashing, and I think a dunk, if I'm not mistaken, up to 3 feet or 3 meters, but not quite IPX8, where I believe you could submerge it for a certain set amount of time depending on the depth rating. The tube of the light features 4, I guess, oblongish rectangular grooves here on the side, with 2 of them bearing marks. One is a manufacturer model name and the other is just various engravings. The tail cap does feature a hole to mount the included wrist strap, and it is nicely rounded here to prevent gouging or scratching. The base is nice and flat, so you could use it in tail stand mode, and the thing about it is that this design prevents it from getting in the way. Like on certain lights, it actually interfered with the tail standing capability because of I guess the lobster claw. This is now at the end of a runtime testing, and as you can see, the red LED in the side switch comes on to indicate that the battery has reached very low voltage. Furthermore, I'm glad to see that the light doesn't just completely cut out, but it goes into a very low mode that's roughly about 5 lumens on my PVC RMD. So my KeyPower IMR finally arrived. Apologies for the darkness, I'm just using natural daylight right now. But anyway, this is a perfect opportunity to test out the charge rate. The U21 is capable of accepting up to a 2 amp charge rate, which would come in very handy considering most of the capacities of the 26650 size that you would typically be dealing with. Once plugged in while charging, this light will stay red. When the cell is fully charged, it would turn blue. And as you can see there on this meter, it originally started a little above 1.8. Oh, there you go, 1.8. And the reason I picked this Samsung charger, I don't know why. The Apple, although it is capable of 2 amp charge rate as well, it was a lot lower. I think it was around 1.5, but this Samsung one actually allows up to 1.81. So keeping in mind, it's handy if you had one of these little meters. They don't cost much. I think on Amazon, like, you could find most of them under $7, but at least it would allow you to know what the charge rate of your adapter is, as well as I had covered previously on the U11, the quality of the cable too, because that does affect your charge rate, and every impact on the charge rate will prolong your charging time. Now, as seems typical with the way that the charging circuitry is implemented, I first experienced this on the Nitecore P25. That is, even though, as you can see, the light was off when I first plugged it in, if there is a power interruption, which I'm going to simulate here, the light will come on. This also occurs on the U11 as well. And once power is resupplied, charging will continue, the light will shut off. Now if you unplug it, the light will immediately come on as well. And though I just have this set to medium 1, I'm glad that it only comes on in low, as you can see there. So that's just something to keep in mind. Size-wise, the only other light that I have that's really comparable is Shadow's JM26, which is also a single-cell 26650 size light and thrower capacity. Now the U21 is slightly longer overall, and the bezel of the JM26 is actually slightly larger, as you can see there. But again, fairly comparable overall. The U21 features a simplified version of the UI that was first featured on the T01 and then subsequently the U11. I'm going to shut the light off and start from the beginning to show you. With the light off, a quick press would turn it on always in low. Then in each subsequent press will cycle through the 5 output levels from low, medium 1, medium 2, high, and turbo, ad nauseum. When the light is on, if you press and hold it, it'll shut the light off. Now from an off state, a long press, meaning at least half a second, would turn the light on to the last memorized mode. All levels are memorized with the exception of low, because you could have that one quick access to low, that's why it's never memorized. So I think that makes perfect sense actually. So I'm going to change that output level, stick with medium 2 here, simulate a battery change, press and hold to turn back on, and you'll see it's memorized in the last output level. I do have the exposure fixed, so you can easily distinguish the difference between the output levels, and this tint here is relatively close to what I'm seeing in real life, if perhaps a teensy bit warmer. Now overall, the tint is more of a yellowish, palish, greenish tint as opposed to true cool white, as you'll see in the beam comparo with the JM26, which is a true cool white. Now, with either the light on or off, a quick double press will automatically enter strobe mode. That's a fixed rate strobe. And then a subsequent press will go into what they call a brief flash, as you can see here. To me, it's almost like a pulsing, but I guess simulation breathing. This is of the side switch only. There is no light coming out from the emitter itself. Now another press from here will enter SOS mode. It's probably one of the slower SOS modes I've seen, but it doesn't matter, the pattern is correct. And then another press from here will go back into SOS, and it'll continuously cycle through these modes ad nauseum. To get out of here, you would press and hold to exit out of the blinky modes. Or let's just say if you were back into this strobe mode again, another quick 2 presses will get back into the fixed output levels. Now with the light on, a quick 2 presses will enter the blinky modes automatically. And each subsequent press will cycle through ad nauseum. And same thing again to exit, press and hold to shut off. So as I had mentioned in the T01 and then subsequently U11 video, I really like this UI a lot, especially the general mode. Although that's not a moonlight mode, to me that's just a general low mode. It gives you quick access to that, and then you can cycle through it. You just need to be cognizant of not going too fast so you don't accidentally invoke the strobe mode, but gives you 5 pretty well spaced fixed output levels, and then the blinky modes when you need it, with quick access to them. In terms of the beam profile, they are throwers after all. My left is U21, on the right is the JM26. I do have the exposure locked on sunny white balance. Now the JM26 beam color is a little bit more bluish cooler than I'm seeing in real life, but the U21 is fairly representative. So U21 has a very tight hotspot as well as a fairly narrow spill as well. As by comparison, the JM26 you can see there is a little bit more floodier. Now apologies, I have to do it this way due to the limitation of the tripod leg, but let me just go ahead and shift the JM26 to the middle here for a second. Now one thing that's not being captured on the lens right now is the artifact. There's actually a lot of artifact here. As you can see now, I've opened up the aperture a bit. You can kind of see all of these artifacts, right? There's this line going out there. There's another going there in the middle. There's one more here that you could barely make out. I could make it out with my eyes, and then finally another almost like a flat 180 line here. So very, very ringy and quite a bit of artifacts. I don't know if I recall in real life, you can't really see that, but still on close-up objects you will notice that. And here's the beam profile. And again, you can see at the same distance, the JM26 has a much floodier spill versus the U21, which is much more compact, tighter overall. And there you can see all that ringiness in the JM26's beam versus the U21, which is literally artifact free. Very nice, man. Now, of course, one may argue at distance these artifacts do go away, but they can still be there, especially like that ring there you can see. So now we get to the beam measurements. We're going to start off with Shadow's JM26. Now, Shadow had quoted 36,000 candela, but this was at 1 meter, so basically it's 36,000 lux at 1 meter, but if you translate that down, I'm anticipating 2250 lux at 4 meters. Alright, next up we have Manker U21. I'm going to measure this in the constant current turbo mode. With these pencil thin beams, it's very hard to get an accurate measurement, so gotta line this up very precisely. But here you can see even well after 30 seconds, I'm in the 8210 range. Now we get to the 800-pound gorilla in the room. ThruNite TN31, this is the XM-L2 version. ThruNite's quote was, for this upgraded version, 90,000 candela. So I'm anticipating about 5625 lux at 4 meters. Wow, that's insane. That's nearly double. I'll double check my figures, but right now that's, I have my meter in the times 10 range, so that figure is actually around the 9,000 range there that you're looking at. But even after the step down, it's still in the 8400 range. So to summarize the throw performance, we'll take it alphabetically here. First up, we have Manker U21. Now, in case you're not familiar with my charts, basically the left-hand side here is like manufacturer specs. Right side here in red is what I measured. So U21. Manker had claimed 124 key candela, which translates to 7750 lux at 4 meters. So this gives me a reference point because of my measured distance.
And they claimed 700 meter beam distance, but it really should have been 704, so they were conservative. They rounded down a little bit. I measured 82.4 lux at 4 meters, which translates to nearly 132K candela and 726 meter beam distance, so that was a little bit better than what they had claimed. And again, this is with my Sphere Scientific calibrated meter. Now, in the chart itself down here, the red bars represent what I measured, and the blue bars are what the manufacturer claims. Next up, we have the Shadows JM26, which features an older emitter, and despite the larger but shallower reflector, it couldn't quite keep up, right? It is an older generation light, but still not too bad. They claim 36K candela at 1 meters, which I think translates to 2250 candela at 4 meters and a 380 meter beam distance. I measured almost 60K candela and 485 meter beam distance, so that was quite better than what they had claimed. Last but not least, we have the ThruNite TN31 XM-L2 version. This light, of course, like I said, is the 800-pound gorilla in the room due to the much larger reflector and deeper reflector, plus, not to mention, being driven off 3 cells. ThruNite had claimed 90K candela, which translates to 5625, although they did quote 840 meter beam distance, but I think that's a mistake because 90K candela actually translates to just 600 meter beam distance. Regardless, though, I measured 9120 lux at 4 meters, which translates to nearly 146K candela peak beam intensity and a 764 meter beam distance. Last but not least here is that same light after the step down, which is still quite good. It measures 8420 at 4 meters, 135K lux, and then 734 meter beam distance. So in summary, you have a very powerful compact single cell, albeit again, not the smallest, right? You probably need a large coat, but still easily carry light. And wow, it just nearly keeps up with ThruNite TN31, which you'll see in real life beam shots next.
Currently outside on a street. This street's about 3 car width wide, standard street. And there's actually a red fire hydrant out there 400 feet from the spot that I'm at right now. I do have the exposure locked at 1/30th of a second. On the D500 it's f1.8 ISO 560. Now the control light I'll be using is ThorFire's VG10. And this is on max output, but I can't make out the fire hydrant with my eyes out there. But the exposure is pretty close to what I'm seeing in real life. So anyway, this VG10 is the control light. Shine it down here, go out there. Like I said, that fire hydrant's somewhere out there in the middle. First off, we have ThruNite TN31. And right there, that's where you can see the fire hydrant that I'm talking about. This is on maximum output level 6. Bring it down here. Go back out to the fire hydrant right there. Shine it towards the tree right there. I say that tree's about 200 feet out, but right here where I'm shining on the fire hydrant, that's 400 feet out. Now we have Manker U21 on turbo. And both of them could easily light up that fire hydrant. Get it up to this tree here, about 200 feet out. Bring it back down to the foreground here. And back out to the fire hydrant.
In terms of the runtime, there's a lot of data here, but bear with me. Basically, I used two different batteries. First off is a power tech, which I ran twice, thus you see the two different sets of data here. The very first time I ran it, I got 1530 lumens at 30 seconds. I was like, wow, that was a bit above what the manufacturer had claimed at 1300 lumens for 1.25 hours or 75 minutes. So I thought that was a little bit of a fluke, but I always calibrate my PVCMD ahead of each runtime, so I left it as is. But I did run it a second time, and in that case, it did jive a little bit more with the two key power runs that I ran over here, as you can see. So let's start off with the power tag. Again, first run, it achieved 1530 lumens. Total average for that run was about 1194, and the room temperature at the time was 75, and the head measured at the last rung of the heat fence closest to the switch was 78, and maximum temperature achieved wasn't all that hot at all. It was just 98 degrees, so not even significant. The second run, like I said, was a little bit more in line. That's this dotted line you see here. I didn't bother with the temperature because by then, this was actually run after the two key power runs. It didn't get meaningfully hot, so I didn't bother so as not to clutter this graph any further. But anyway, this dotted line represents the second power tech run. Now, this is an OEM battery supplied with the PowerTech Hero. I have no idea what the underlying cell is, but it is a protected cell. And this one was a little strange because the second time around, look at that drop. It didn't even do this step down, right? It literally fell off the cliff after it could no longer maintain. And this you see down here is not zero. In case you missed it during the low voltage warning section, the light does not completely shut off. It will once it reaches below 2.8 volts, but I didn't get that low. It kind of goes into this low mode, which is roughly about 4.5 lumens. Now, the two key power runs, same battery, but the black one represents I literally just got the cell, ran it for the very first time, no cycles on it. So I recorded 1460 lumens at 30 seconds. Total average for that run was about 1239, again by NCF01 standards, which states the output reached after it drops to 10% of the original, which would basically mean below 146 lumens. So I achieved 83 minutes there. The second time I ran it again, I got slightly better run times, but pretty much the same, 1460 lumens, total average was 1238, and pretty much for the same exact corresponding step downs. Now with this blue power tag, I suspect that potentially it doesn't respond well to deep discharge because again, by here it's 3.17 volts, which is, not good for any lithium ion batteries. So thus, long story short, just don't over discharge your cells. Don't get it to the point where it's low voltage warning because again, it's just not healthy for the cells. And that's just a general recommendation for any lithium ion cells. The surprise here, though, is that I was actually expecting the key power, because it is an IMR unprotected cell, to do significantly better in terms of the output, but that wasn't necessarily the case. As you saw, again, okay, fine, maybe if this one was a fluke, but still, it didn't do better than, say, the second run of that power tech. So for the U21, I recommend quality cells. I just so happen to pick a key power one. Looking at HKJ's battery comparator, it looked like it did pretty well. Plus, it was fairly easy to obtain, so purchased it off of Illumination Supply. Got to me in less than a week, so that's why I went with them. But overall, again, any quality IMR cell would do well. I didn't bother with the 18650 because, again, I wanted to see what this light was truly capable of with the best cells, so thus it's this. But with 18650 cells, you could just consider it will probably be a bit worse than what you're seeing here in both, not necessarily in terms of the output, but definitely in terms of the runtime. So in summary, I'm happy to see that I'm able to exceed both the stated output as well as the runtime, well, with the exception of that one, which was second run. But in general, for the other three at least, both the output and the runtime versus what Manker has stated.
So in summary, I feel like Manker's really been hitting them out of the park with the specific kind of niche categories, if you will, right? First the T01 with the compact AA size thrower, the E14 with the multi-emitter, and then now the U21 and a compact thrower. As you saw in the throw measurements, this did not necessarily outcompete the TN31, but to be fair, they're not really in the same category because this is a single cell 26650 size with maximum voltage of 4.2, whereas the TN31 has the luxury of relying on 3 cells, plus not to mention a much larger reflector overall. But as you can see in the outdoor shots, it wasn't too far behind in terms of performance. It was right there with the TN31. So in consideration specific of the size, this is somewhat pocketable, although probably in a very large cold pocket, whereas the TN31, it's a very specific tool with no hold bars with regards to the sizing and the weight. Now the JM26, it doesn't really quite compete because It is using an older emitter, plus not to mention the reflector is not designed on par with the U21. The U21's reflector is just in a different category. As you saw in the beam comparison with the JM26, there was pretty much literally no artifacts in the beam profile, whereas the JM26 has some of that. So very, very smooth beam, outstanding throw, reasonably compact size, again in consideration that it is a 26650 size light. It has the ability to use an 18650 with a sleeve. You have that awesome UI which you could easily go through all the output levels, quick access to low, again the blue beam is because of the complex fluorescent, cycle through 5 output levels, and then quick access to the blinky modes should you desire them. I don't know how often I would be using that. Maybe during camping at night I would set that so I could easily see it, wake up, hear something go bump in the night. Or maybe if you set this on your nightstand, you could easily see that in the middle of the night. The SOS comes in handy, I guess maybe if you're camping or going exploring. And the great thing about it is that the USB recharging port gives you a max charging rate of 2 amps, which comes in handy with these larger size batteries. And of course it uses the ubiquitous micro USB port, so that way pretty much, you know, any device like a solar charger or something like that with sufficient charging rate should be able to charge this light. I've reviewed a few of the Manker lights now, and their fit and finish just continues to uphold outstanding quality. The anodization is all finished fine with no blemishes whatsoever. There's none missing in the gaps nor on the corner edges like here. Certain manufacturers struggle with that, where they'll be missing or have a thinner layer of anodization on these edges here, but no such issues here with this light. Every single place where it has been carved is fully deburred. It's very smooth. There is absolutely nothing rough about it at all. I love the fact that they continue to use this rounded edge here so as not to cause gouging or scratches, as I had mentioned earlier. The texture here is decent, and likewise again no missing anodization between the crevices here. Just again, overall it just goes to show very, very high quality maintained through all aspects of the production of this light. Now in terms of a lockout feature, perhaps maybe if you press and hold for, I'm guessing maybe 4 or 5 seconds, it would have been nice if they had included an electronic lockout, but not the end of the world. Quick twist of the tail cap, you're locked out right there. As you saw in the runtimes and lumens output measurement, this was an overachiever. It measured a bit higher, and that was just with a PowerTac protected cell. So, of course, that's a sample variation of 1. I only have 1 sample, so your mileage may vary, of course. Also happy to see the fact that the beam throw, of course, again on this overachiever, did exceed slightly what the manufacturer claim was. This is another solid release from Manker, and especially in consideration of the price point, it's truly competitive in terms of I can't really think of a thrower out there other than say maybe a OEM that they built for another manufacturer, but I can't think of a light in this category that would compete with it in terms of the throw. But if you can't think of one, by all means throw it into comment. It's awesome job, Manker. Another solid release. Kudos, man. As part of FTC disclosure, the U21 was provided by Manker for review. Thanks again for watching.